They built 98 luxury homes on land that legally belonged to me, without notice, without remorse. Kathleen Monroe, the HOA president, claimed I'd abandoned it, waving forged documents and mocking my absence like I didn't matter. But what she didn't know is that I had the one document that could bury their entire operation. And when the truth exploded in court, it didn't just take her down, it rewrote state law and exposed a nationwide scam. My name is Ethan Cole. And it all started the moment my tires hit the gravel road slicing through Willow Creek. The scent of dry earth and the soft hum of crickets brought back memories of childhood. My grandma's laughter, endless summers. The ranch was just past the last bend of the hill, framed by gnarled oaks and weathered wooden fences. But when I reached the driveway, my heart stopped. Instead of the old house and barn, there was a gleaming metal automatic gate. Beyond it, a new world that wasn't mine, but built exactly where mine was supposed to be. I stood there for minutes, staring at the uniform, upscale houses like they were modern ghosts planted over my history. They were perfectly manicured lawns, paved streets with fancy names like Maple Lane and Golden Ridge, and a gold-plated sign that read, "Welcome to Cedar Hills, HOA Community." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but the metallic taste in my mouth told a different story. That was my grandma's land. That was mine. Or, so I thought until that moment. The dry breeze of Willow Creek stung my face as I stood before the houses now sitting on my grandma's ranch. The grass crunched under my boots as I approached the main entrance, still trying to wrap my head around how this could have happened. That's when I saw her, a woman with rigid posture and a look of disgust, dressed in high-end clothes and heels that sank slightly into the turf. She strode toward me like she was inspecting trash left on the sidewalk. "You Ethan Cole?" "I am. This land belongs to my family." Or, it did. My voice came out steadier than I expected, but her expression didn't budge. Kathleen Monroe planted herself right in front of me, arms crossed, sizing me up like I was a minor nuisance. "The Cole family?" she snorted, glancing over my shoulder at the beat-up pickup parked on the road. "Figures, but I hate to break it to you. You're way too late." I tried to keep my anger in check. "This land was left to me. I've got papers back home that—" She raised a hand, cutting me off like she was bored. "Papers? How quaint. You know what I've got? An entire neighborhood built, residents, investments, signed contracts. This is Cedar Hills now. What you've got is a past, buried." The way she said it made every word feel like lead. I pointed at the houses behind her, trying to stay composed. "You know this was private property, my grandma's farm. You had no right." She stepped closer, her face now inches away, her voice low and vicious. "The word was is perfect. You know what happens when someone vanishes for nearly a decade? The world moves on, and lucky for us, without waiting for the forgotten." The injustice burned in my chest, but she kept going. "The land was declared abandoned. We tried to find the owner. Notifications sent, legal notices posted. And guess where they went? To your old address, the one that got torn down. Tough luck." She smiled without a hint of remorse. "You think you can disappear and then show up years later demanding something like time froze just for you?" I fought to keep my hands from shaking. "I didn't disappear. I worked out of state, came back home. My grandma left me this." Kathleen tilted her head slightly, almost like she was studying a wounded animal. "Oh, how sweet. But your grandma's not here to back that up, is she?" The low blow was deliberate, and even if she was, you think a warm memory holds any weight against the permits we secured? Courts don't care about your feelings. This is theft. My voice came out weak but true. "Theft is storming into a community like you own the place." She shot back, pointing at the ground. "You're standing on private property right now, Mr. Cole, and you've got no proof. A stranger on the edge of something already settled. You really think anyone's gonna listen to you?" She spoke with the confidence of someone who'd already won. I stayed silent. In the background, the new rooftops gleamed under the sun, and the shiny cars in the driveways seemed to mock my presence. "You don't strike me as someone who lasts long in legal battles," she said, tilting her face slightly. "Those things cost money, time, lawyers, the kind of stuff that doesn't match your rusty pickup and that lost look in your eyes." She knew exactly where to jab. "What did you expect coming here? That we'd apologize and hand it all back? That the residents would pack up because of the old ranch owner's grandkid?" The way she said grandkid dripped with scorn. "Newsflash, we don't live in fairy tales, and the law, in this case, is on our side. Know why? Because we wrote it before you even woke up." My eyes stung, but I didn't let a single tear fall. "I'm gonna prove this is mine." Kathleen took a step back, her smile still frozen on her face. "Go ahead and try. Just don't take too long." Every day that passes, more concrete goes into the ground, and every new contract we sign is another brick burying you legally. She spoke like she knew time was her deadliest weapon. But if you want to keep at it, she said, now glancing around, be my guest. Just watch yourself. Residents get jumpy about strangers. They call the cops over anything these days. It was a threat dressed as a warning, and she knew, given who I was, one phone call could turn everything against me. The racism wasn't overt. It was institutional, quiet, polished. She turned, walking slowly back toward the neighborhood she'd built over my past. The sound of her heels on the grass felt like hammer strikes on my pride. Every step was a reminder that I was alone, unarmed, invisible against a system she knew like the back of her hand. Good luck, Mr. Cole, she called over her shoulder. You're gonna need it. I stood there, staring at the houses in the distance. A weight settled in my chest, like someone had carved a hole inside me. That woman wasn't just cruel. She was the face of an entire machine, a system designed to crush anyone who couldn't fight back. And right then, I was exactly that, a name in ruins, surrounded by new concrete and fake smiles on pristine facades. I walked back to my truck, my heart pounding. Everything felt lost. They had the gates, the documents, the rules. All I had was my grandma's memory and the promise I made at her deathbed. Never let them rip our roots from this land. But now, even with everything crumbling, I knew there was still a chance, a tiny crack, and that's where I'd start digging. After that run-in with Kathleen, I went quiet for days. Every word she said echoed in my head like a verdict. The way she spoke, with such certainty, such coldness, didn't feel like someone who'd made a simple mistake. It felt like someone who'd done this before, and won. That's when something clicked in me, a suspicion that wouldn't let me sleep. I'd spent 6 years working in land auditing for an energy company, analyzing exactly these kinds of situations, deeds, titles, legal gray zones, and the more I thought about it, the more things didn't add up. How did they build 98 houses there so fast? Where were the environmental permits, the city approvals, the zoning records? It smelled like a scam, but a scam dressed up real nice. I went back to the county clerk's office in Fairview and requested full access to the property's history, ownership records, zoning changes, transfers. The clerk hesitated. "You sure you want to dig this deep?" he asked, like he knew what I'd find. "I'm sure." I spent hours sifting through digital and paper files, page by page, number by number, until something stopped me cold. There, in a deed transfer dated 2 years after my grandma's passing, was my name, a digitized signature. Problem is, I wasn't even in Texas back then. I was in Kentucky, wrapping up a job. I never signed anything. And even from a glance I could tell, the signature was too perfect, lifted from an old receipt I'd signed years earlier. It was forged. My stomach churned. This wasn't just unfair. It was a crime. Somehow, someone had manipulated a clerk's office, faked my consent, and legalized the takeover of my land. I started cross-referencing dates, names, documents. I found the same notary who'd authenticated that signature was quietly suspended months later. It was all there, hidden in the fine print. Even weirder, the minutes from the public meeting where the transfer was approved didn't exist in the city archives. It was like the meeting never happened. But in the HOA's paperwork, it was listed as an official event. Local papers didn't cover it. No notices, no ads. It was like someone had rewritten the past by hand, and nobody noticed, or nobody wanted to. The anger I'd felt before turned into focus. I went back to Willow Creek and started recording everything on my phone. Pictures of the houses, cracks in the structures, changes in the soil. I made short videos narrating every suspicion, every inconsistency. I saved everything to multiple backups, like an undercover investigator guarding evidence before it could be erased. This wasn't just a fight for an inheritance anymore. It was a mission. I hit the county library and dug through newspapers from 10, 15 years back. I learned that land had been eyed by a developer called Brightstone Equity, one of the founding companies behind Cedar Hills HOA. And get this, the CEO was the brother-in-law of a city council member. Too many connections, not enough transparency. I started jotting down names. Kathleen Monroe, Paul Grayson, former urban planning director, Owen Lassiter, HOA lawyer. It all revolved around the same group, a group that seemed to have the right paths to bypass any obstacle, from health permits to entire clerk's offices. It was clear there was a criminal network behind Cedar Hill's polished facade, but the deeper I dug, the lonelier I felt. The looks from public employees, the long silences on phone calls, the privacy policy rejections. It all screamed that nobody wanted to get involved. It was like I was unearthing something everyone had learned to ignore, and I could feel it. If I kept going, I could get burned. But if I stopped, my story would turn to dust. It was on a rainy night, sitting in the cab of a gas station, that I got the first sign someone else was listening. An unknown number sent a short text. "They've done this before. I know what they did to you." I replied instantly. The bubble of isolation was starting to crack, and with it came the chance for an ally. The message came from an unsaved number. Redwood Diner, 9 a.m., come alone. The name didn't ring a bell, but the town was nearby, and curiosity shouted louder than fear. I drove through the night to the blinking red neon sign over a corner diner, shrouded in thick fog that blanketed Fairview's streets. The town seemed asleep, but I felt like I was about to wake something much bigger. I walked in, ordered a black coffee, and sat near the steamed-up window. She showed up 5 minutes later. Brown hair, thin, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights, and a posture that said, "I'm not here to chat." Without a word, she pulled out the chair across from me and ditched her hoodie. "Jade Miller," she said, keeping her voice low. "I worked in Cedar Hill's legal department for 3 years, and I saw things I couldn't ignore anymore." Jade glanced around with every sentence. She didn't trust anyone. They forged signatures, used shell companies, bribe environmental inspectors, all with stone-cold precision. "You're not the only one, Ethan." Her tone was heavy, direct. No room for theatrics. Willow Creek was just another case, one of dozens, always the same playbook. They move in, build, legalize later, and anyone who tries to stop them disappears. I sat quiet, swallowing her words like they were shards of glass. "You got proof of this?" I asked. She opened a small backpack and pulled out a USB drive. "I've got internal recordings, altered meeting minutes, emails with faked approvals. Never thought I'd use them, until I heard about you. You're the first who didn't back down." Her voice wavered for a second. "And you might be the last." I asked why she'd left. Jade hesitated. "They fired me for breach of conduct." Truth? I refused to shred clerk records that went against the HOA's interests. Next day, my badge was deactivated, and my reputation was trashed. The choked-up anger was there, but she kept her focus. "They buried my career, but they won't bury anyone else. Not if I can help it." She slid the USB drive to me discreetly, tucked in a crumpled napkin. "Don't save this on your computer. Use an external hard drive. They've got people in servers, ISPs, everything." It was unreal. I was sitting there, receiving secret files in a small-town diner like I was in a spy flick. But this was real. The proof was in my hand, the truth heavy in my palm. "You're gonna need people with guts," she said before standing. "But be careful. They play dirty, dirtier than you think." She walked to the door and paused for a moment. "Oh, and Ethan, don't trust anyone at City Hall. If you really want to expose this, you'll have to dig where no one's dared before." And with that, she vanished into the foggy street, swallowed up like she'd never been there. I sat there for a few minutes, alone, staring into my cold coffee. Jade hadn't just given me proof, she'd given me direction. And now that I knew I wasn't fighting a neighborhood association but a machine, I needed a plan. The trap had to be perfect, and this time, I'd be the one pulling the strings. With the USB drive in hand, and my stomach in knots, I headed straight to the only place I felt safe, my uncle's old workshop on the edge of Willow Creek. It was a dusty shed, wires dangling, an old workbench cluttered with tools. I plugged the external drive into an ancient laptop with no internet, just to be safe. When I opened the files, the screen filled with PDFs, audio recordings, and emails flagged in red. What I saw wasn't just corruption. It was crime, raw and unfiltered. Among the documents were edited meeting minutes with conflicting timestamps, contradictory sworn statements, and even internal photos showing illegal debris dumps. In one video, an HOA contractor said flat out, "Bury it there. No one's gonna check." The filming location, right where my grandma's old barn used to be. There, under landscaped lawns and colorful playgrounds, were tons of toxic waste covered by artificial turf. I started cross-referencing with environmental maps. The built-up area encroached on a sensitive aquifer zone, which required a technical report before any construction. But the report submitted by the HOA was dated 2013, issued by a company that shut down in 2012. In other words, the report was fake. The engineer's signature, repeated across 8 other documents from different parts of the state. A scam with a reusable template. Even more alarming was where the HOA's money was going. In leaked financials from Jade, There were recurring payments to law firms that weren't even listed as service providers. One had Kathleen Monroe herself as a direct beneficiary. She was funneling residents' dues to cover her own legal defense, with their HOA fees. The houses built at breakneck speed were made with recycled materials from demolished subdivisions in another state. No quality control. Some of Jade's recordings caught internal meetings with lines like, "Get it done fast, slap some paint on, and the buyers won't notice." An engineer warned about cracks from unstable foundations, and the response was a muffled laugh, followed by, "We're selling dreams, not buildings." Armed with this, I went back to the neighborhood like an undercover cop. I walked the streets like any resident, snapping photos of sidewalk cracks, exterior leaks, and lawns that looked fake. I found they'd used cement-mixed fill to cheap out on leveling. Over time, it would sink, and it was already starting. A disaster waiting to blow. I talked to 2 recent buyers pretending I was interested in a house. Both complained about the same issues: creaking floors at night, misaligned doors. One said the HOA called it normal for new homes. But when I asked about the material's origins, the HOA realtor froze. No answer. It was obvious. They were trying to keep a ticking bomb under wraps with sales smiles. As I gathered more evidence, an ugly truth started to emerge. The HOA didn't just steal my land, they poisoned it. And worse, they threw innocent families onto that poison, selling a manufactured lifestyle built on rubble and filth. Every swing set, every decorative lamppost, hid a lie crafted for profit. It was more than crime. It was cruelty dressed up as a planned community. I reached out to an old colleague from environmental inspections. I shared part of the story, and he reluctantly agreed to review the documents. 2 days later, he called, his voice heavy. "Ethan, this is big. If this checks out, we're talking federal crimes, environmental violations, document fraud, public health risks." He told me to get legal help ASAP, and he suggested something bolder. "You need to set a trap." It sounded like a movie, but it made sense. None of this would matter without a confession. If they could manipulate documents and buy witnesses, the only shot was catching someone telling the truth. Jade was in. With her HOA experience, she knew how to lure Kathleen into a meeting. The plan was simple: use the remaining land to fake a new deal and record everything. Over the next few weeks, we set the stage. We created a fake investor identity interested in buying leftover land for expansion. Jade handled the initial contact, and Kathleen, wary, insisted on meeting in person. The location was set, a low-key diner outside town. We rigged the place with hidden mics and, just in case, got backup from federal agents already probing similar complaints elsewhere. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. The memory of my grandma planting mint where an electric fence now stood cut me deep. But for the first time, I felt I had something in my hands. The evidence was stacked. The trap was set. And if it all worked, this would be the day Kathleen Monroe finally tripped over her own arrogance. The meeting was set for a Saturday, 11 a.m., at a quiet spot called Rusty Spoon Diner, surrounded by dirt roads and old pines. Kathleen picked the place, maybe to feel safe, maybe because she knew the staff. What she didn't know was that the kitchen had been wired with mics and cameras days earlier, thanks to a hush-hush deal with federal agents. Outside, 2 unmarked vans monitored everything. I was nervous but ready. I wore a wrinkled blazer, messed up my hair on purpose, and introduced myself as Martin Ellis, a Chicago investor looking to expand the Cedar Hills concept to the East County. Jade, posing as my legal advisor, carried a folder of fake contracts. Kathleen showed up 15 minutes late, like she wanted to remind us she was in charge. But that day, she wasn't. She sat down without taking off her sunglasses and ordered an iced tea. "So, Mr. Ellis, I hear you're ambitious," she started, with that casual tone she used to mask manipulation. "We've got some plots still open, some with, let's say, legal flexibility." I forced a grin and replied, "That's what I like. Speed, less paperwork, more concrete." She smiled back. The trap was starting to close. As lunch went on, she loosened up and got cocky. You know how it goes. Can't always wait for red tape. We act, then legalize. She took a long sip, eyeing me over her glass. "Did it in Willow Creek, old ranch, abandoned by some family that vanished. Turned it into a neighborhood before anyone blinked." My stomach twisted, but I stayed in character. Every sentence was another crime spilling out. "What if someone shows up?" I asked, faking concern. She shrugged. "They don't last. Paperwork outweighs nostalgia. The law sides with whoever's got the setup. They cry. Try to sue. but in the end, they've got nothing to stand on. Jade squeezed my arm under the table, our signal that the recorders were catching it all. Kathleen had just confessed. Legalized theft. There was this guy, the ranch owner's grandson, she said, chuckling. Came back thinking the world stopped for him. Showed up with some sob story about inheritance and justice. Left with his tail between his legs. I didn't flinch, but a lump formed in my throat. He should have learned. No presence, no possession. The contempt in her voice was sickening, and the feds outside were hearing every word. She kept going. The HOA's a machine. We don't just build houses. We erase stories. That's when Jade spoke, her voice steady. And where's the line? Kathleen raised an eyebrow. Suspicious. The line's whatever no one can prove. Silence. The tension was thick, but we had what we needed. Time to exit without raising flags. The final step was letting her think she'd sold us. We said goodbye with fake promises of future deals and cold handshakes. The second we left, the agents moved in. Nothing dramatic, no cuffs, no shouting, just firm, quiet. One flashed a badge at her table. Kathleen went pale. When it hit her, she realized she'd hung herself with her own words. The woman who'd humiliated me on my own land was now shaking in a roadside diner. I was called in right after to verify details and hand over Jade's USB drive. At the station, I watched the investigators' faces harden as they listened to the recordings. One looked at me and said, "You have no idea what's about to blow up." But I did. Every ounce of her arrogance was turning against her, and for the first time, I held the cards. Back at my uncle's workshop, alone, I closed my eyes for a few minutes. The smell of grease and old wood now mixed with the sweet taste of a turnaround. The trap had worked. And more than that, I'd proven even a seemingly untouchable system could collapse when faced with courage, strategy, and truth. But the main stage was still ahead, the courtroom. Jade, now officially a protected whistleblower, called the next day. Kathleen's in custody for questioning, denying everything, but they're already digging through accounts, properties, emails. The investigation would go public soon. For me, though, the fight wasn't just legal. It was personal. I wanted justice, but I also wanted my family's name cleared. The next step was making them answer in court. The case was filed in Fairview County Court as Cole v. Cedar Hills HOA. It quickly became more than a lawsuit. It became a headline. The evidence was so extensive, the judge ordered extra sessions. Every email, recording, and doctored minute was stacked in sealed boxes, labeled with FBI tags. And at the top of the pile, a document that changed everything, my family's original deed of ownership. That deed, unearthed after weeks of legal digging, included a forgotten clause, a 1957 mineral restriction barring any transfer, sale, or subdivision without a direct heir's signature. It voided every contract signed after my grandma's death. The judge read the clause aloud in court. The silence that followed was deafening, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The HOA's defense tried to argue the documents were outdated or irrelevant under new urban laws, but the judge cut them off. This isn't about zoning, it's about fraud, violation of property rights, and possibly civil conspiracy. Kathleen, seated beside her lawyers, kept a stone face, but her fingers visibly trembled on the table. The following sessions were packed with jaw-dropping testimony. Jade testified for nearly 3 hours, exposing every fraudulent move the HOA made. Realtors, inspectors, engineers, and even a former clerk confirmed pressures, bribes, and manipulations. One contractor, faced with the evidence, admitted, "I knew it was wrong, but the money was too good." The court wasn't just judging a land grab, it was judging an entire corrupt system. Outside, protesters started showing up with signs. Some were Cedar Hills residents, furious at being duped. Others were victims of other HOAs across the state, seeing my case as a chance to be heard. Local media swarmed the courthouse steps. The Cole case, as they called it, stopped the town. For a few days, it stopped the state. On the 5th day, the judge issued a crushing preliminary ruling. The 98 houses were built illegally. Any claim by the HOA was suspended until a final verdict. More than that, the association's assets were frozen. And everyone directly involved in the fraud faced investigation for forgery, environmental crimes, and misuse of public funds. Kathleen was arrested on the spot in court, in front of cameras and reporters. She didn't say a word, but her look wasn't superiority anymore. It was fear. I saw the woman who tried to erase me face the truth she never expected to surface. For the first time, she didn't control the story. And I took back my name. The state prosecutor launched a broader investigation based on the case's fallout. Names started popping up: politicians, high-end realtors, clerk officials. It was like a house of cards collapsing. The DA called it the biggest land fraud scandal in recent Texas history. And at the center of it all, my grandma's land, our ranch, our story. The final ruling declared me as the rightful heir, the sole legal owner of the land. Every contract based on forged documents was nullified. It was a win, sure, but also a burden. Behind every house built there was a family, some innocent, misled like me, and now they faced the fallout of a lie they never asked to live. The story went national. The state legislature called hearings on HOA abuses, and among the proposals was a new bill, the Cole Amendment, mandating public tracking and full transparency for all HOA transactions in Texas. For the first time, the system that nearly swallowed me was being forced to answer. The news spread like wildfire. In under 48 hours, the Cole case was all over national networks. Headlines flashed my photo alongside terms like historic land fraud and HOA mafia. The revelations went beyond anyone's expectations. Cedar Hills HOA was just the tip of a massive iceberg, and now the whole country was looking at Willow Creek. Reporters from NBC, CNN, and even international outlets camped out at the courthouse. Jade's interviews went viral. The videos of Kathleen's meeting aired on primetime shows, and each new piece of evidence knocked down another domino. It came out that the HOA had pocketed over $18 million in fraudulent deals in just the last 4 years. But what set the public off was the political ties. A state senator, Gregory Harlan, a vocal advocate for responsible community ownership, was named in emails with Kathleen, offering legal cover for campaign donations. The scandal ballooned. Harlan denied it all on live TV. 2 days later, he resigned. Other names started falling like rocks. 2 contractors arrested for hiding toxic waste, 3 Fairview clerks indicted for forging public records, and at least 6 environmental inspectors turned to plea deals. It felt like a crime series script, but it was real, and behind it all was the voice of a grandma who never stopped speaking in my heart. Kathleen Monroe was sentenced to 28 years in prison, with a fine topping $6 million for environmental damage, civil fraud, and embezzlement. During the sentencing, she stayed silent, but when she looked at me, something had shifted. Not hatred. It was the look of someone seeing their own reflection, unmasked, for the first time. The Justice Department opened a special unit for HOA-related land crimes. Complaints poured in nationwide. Victims of similar schemes started coming forward, some with even worse stories. Suddenly, one regular guy's fight against a local association became a national symbol for land justice. What was once ignored now dominated headlines and legislative agendas. And through it all, I tried to stay grounded. I still woke up at night hearing that electric gate closing in my memory. I still tasted the bitterness of Kathleen's scorn in Willow Creek's dry air. But now, there was redress. And more importantly, prevention. What happened to me would shield others from the same. The Cole Amendment passed in a historic bipartisan vote. For the first time, every HOA in Texas would have to log every transaction, meeting, and contract change on a public platform. It was the start of a new era. I never imagined my pain would spark change, but it did. And that change now carried my name. My grandma's name, our land, our story, would never be forgotten. The injustice had made noise, but when justice came, it echoed across the country. And though the weight of the fight still lived in me, it was now shared with thousands of voices that had once been silenced, voices that at last were being heard. With everything that had happened, I could have just torn down those houses, but walking through the streets of what used to be my ranch, I saw kids playing, families who had nothing to do with the corruption that put them there. They were victims too, duped, sold false promises. That's when I realized this wasn't about destroying what was built. It was about rebuilding what was lost. With fairness, I used the profits from oil found on a strip of the land, a resource my grandma always suspected was there but never had the means to tap, to set up a transparent legal fund. With it, I made deals so every honest family could stay in their homes, but now legitimately, buying directly from me, with proper deeds, no oppressive HOA involved. Jade and I founded Miller & Cole Legal Aid, a group dedicated to protecting heirs, seniors, and small landowners from HOA abuses. Within months, we were getting cases from across the country. Our mission was clear: stop what happened in Willow Creek from happening anywhere else. And every win we scored was another tribute to the woman who planted the first seeds on that land. Willow Creek changed. The old HOA signs came down one by one. In their place, community gardens sprouted, open playgrounds appeared, and monthly neighbor meetups started. Fear gave way to conversation. Arrogance gave way to warmth. What was once a symbol of power and exclusion now bloomed as proof that rebuilding was possible, not forced, but built on respect and truth. On the restored porch of my grandma's old house, now a local legal aid hub, I hung a hand-carved wooden sign. Here, the land belongs to those who care, not those who control. Every time I pass by and see someone reading it, I feel the cycle close. Even after they tried to erase our story, we rewrote it with dignity. My grandma always said, "Plant with love, and you'll harvest justice." And despite all the rocks in the path, that's what happened. Justice came, not just through the courts, but through memory, truth, and the future we're building together. Where there was once silence and concrete, now there are roots, alive, strong, and impossible to uproot.
Have you ever felt powerless in the face of something deeply unjust? What part of this story outraged you the most? It's super important that you drop your comment. You won't believe the twist that went down in this other story popping up on your screen. Check it out right now.